On October 29, 1969, at 10:30 p.m., a message was sent over two research computers. These computers were located 350 miles apart. One of the computers was located at the University of California, Los Angeles, and the other computer was located at Stanford University. This message, which was sent on those computers, marked the start of a project that would change the world. But what was this project called? ARPANET, which was an American governmental project initiated by Robert Taylor, marked the beginning of the Internet revolution. ARPANET's operational period, spanning from 1969 to 1990, led to many innovations that would be crucial to the development of the Internet. Their most important innovations, TCP and IP, unified the networks of the time and remain in use today. ARPANET will lay the foundations for Tim Berners-Lee's World Wide Web, forging a globally interconnected world unlike even the printing press or the telephone.
In the 1960s, America was at the height of the Cold War against the Soviet Union. During these years, in order to exert superiority over the other, both sides rapidly developed their technology, as seen with the space race. However, with this, tensions heightened between the two superpowers and fear of a nuclear attack started to loom over the United States. The main method of communication was the telephone. Although a good source of communication, it had a major flaw. The centralized nature of the telephone systems of the time meant that they were likely to fail after receiving damage. To combat this, Rand Corporation was tasked with finding a solution. Rand, specifically Paul Barron, created an outline for a packet switch and decentralized communication system. A series of papers called On Distributed Communications would outline this idea and would be written in 1964. However, this was never put into practice by the military, and many telephone companies such as AT&T even discredited his ideas. These ideas, mainly packet switching, were later used by the Advanced Research Projects Agency, ARPA, as the basis of the ARPANET project. ARPANET was created from a desire to share information over great distances, specifically between researchers. ARPANET allowed researchers to share resources such as computer programs, data sets, and processing power. The ARPANET project was initiated by Robert Taylor, who made Lawrence Roberts project manager. ARPA also contracted both Beranek and Newman to build the machinery needed to form the network. A variety of people from numerous universities and institutions across the nation contributed to the project, the first of which were Stephen Crocker, Jonathan Postel, and Vinton Cerf, who were UCLA grad students at the time. On October 29, 1969, at UCLA, Charlie Klein and Leonard Kleinrock attempted to send a message across the nascent network to Bill Duvall at Stanford. This message was supposed to be log. However, when Klein tried to type log into the system, only low had been sent when the system crashed. In less than an hour, the bug had been fixed, and the message was sent successfully.
Etc. So this was the beginning of the Internet. You might say that on September 2nd, when this first connection was made, the Internet took its first breath of life. And when this message was sent from UCLA to SRI, you might say that the infant Internet uttered its first words.
In the words of Mark Webber, the 1969 connection was not just a symbolic milestone in the project that led to the Internet, but in the whole idea of connecting computers and eventually billions of people to each other. This was the first time such a network was used, marking the beginning of ARPANET.
This revolutionary network pioneered two ideas that would become the core of the Internet. The first was packet switching, where information is transmitted in portions called packets. This means that limited transmission resources, like wiring, are only used when actively sending packets. In contrast, telephone systems use the inefficient circuit switching, which functions by establishing a transmission session, completely reserving some transmission resources until it's over. This is less efficient because resources are always reserved, even during intervals when information isn't being sent. The second was a decentralized network system. Unlike a centralized network system, which relied on a couple of highly connected devices to hold the entire network together, a decentralized network didn't rely on specific devices in the network. By creating many connections between most of the devices, an extremely high number of routes for information to travel could be achieved. This made the system more resilient to damage, by giving any two devices a variety of backup routes to communicate with. Alongside the rise of ARPANET, other government-funded packet switching networks also appeared, such as the National Physical Laboratories Network located in the UK, or the Cyclades in France. These networks also influenced the development of the Internet. The researchers from different networks often directly collaborated with each other, forming the International Network Working Group. which later became part of the International Federation for Information Processing. Later, some small commercial networks also started to develop, such as Telenet, FimeNet, and DataPack. Slowly, various different networks began to connect with each other, which is known as internetworking. The first of which was the connection between the ARPANET and the University College London's network in 1973. However, communication between the different networks was difficult due to separate networks having a unique system of manipulating and transmitting data.
ARPANET was a pioneer and innovator. It was the first packet switching network and had several contributions to the development of the Internet. For example, the first form of email, SendMessage, was invented by Raymond Tomlinson. The file transfer protocol was created by Abbe Bouchon. FTP was used to transfer files over ARPANET and is still used today. However, the most important of these contributions was TCP and IP, created by Vinton Cerf and Robert Kahn. TCP and IP was invented to be a universal system of information transmission and routing. The entirety of ARPANET has switched to using TCP and IP on January 1, 1983. The OSI protocols were creation of the International Organization for Standardization. These OSI protocols composed of another system of transmitting data like TCP and IP and were used by many networks of the time. So the formal adoption of TCP and IP by ARPANET was a critical moment in the unification of different networks, as the growing popularity of TCP and IP led to a conflict between TCP IP using networks and OSI using networks. This was known as the Protocol War. The Protocol War ended with virtually all networks in the world using TCP and IP. This finally allowed connected networks, the internetwork or the Internet, to easily communicate. Another American federal agency would become important to the growth of the Internet around the start of the Protocol War. The National Science Foundation, NSF, would create the CSNet, which connected even more academic institutions to ARPANET. The NSF later created the NSFNet that grew large enough to render ARPANET unnecessary, leading to ARPANET's decommissioning in 1990. It was also around this time that laws regarding commercialization of the Internet were loosening, allowing more commercial networks to start appearing. NSFNet would be dissolved in 1995 when management and distribution of connections was almost completely handed over to commercial networks. With all pieces already in place, the Internet grew quickly. As an increasing amount of commercialized networks appeared, the Internet expanded and connected more people to the digital world.
In 1989, Tim Berners-Lee, a researcher at CERN, had invented the World Wide Web to allow researchers to more easily share information across the Internet. Mirroring the story of ARPANET, which was originally only used by researchers and later became the most important piece in the development of the Internet, the World Wide Web would be released to the public in 1991 and become a global phenomenon. The first website? A website explaining the World Wide Web project. But what is the World Wide Web? The World Wide Web, or WWW, is a collection of basically every single website. Tim Berners-Lee created 3 innovations that allowed others to easily create websites and traverse through them. These 3 were made public so that any person or business could contribute to the web. These were HTML, Hypertext Markup Language, which was a coding language used to design web pages. The URL, Uniform Resource Locator, was a string of characters that identify where something is on the Internet. Finally, HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, which was a method for transferring data over the Internet. The web gained rapid popularity after the creation of web browsers. The first was a browser called World Wide Web with no spaces, which became the name of a collection of websites. Later, a number of web browsers would repeatedly succeed each other, being Mosaic, then Netscape browsers, then the Internet Explorer, and finally Chrome, which remains the most popular today. The Internet brought unimaginable changes to education, commerce, and daily life. People can now effortlessly access anything from research papers to the humblest blog in moments. It allows companies to reach a vast audience, and social media allows people to express themselves and interact with others. What started as a desire to share information among researchers turned into the Internet revolution, reshaping many aspects of life. It is through the efforts of visionaries like Robert Taylor that the Internet exists today.
The university said, why do I want to share my computer with anybody else? And the communications community basically thought we were all crazy. In fact, I remember during that era being yelled at and hooed at meetings by DCA and the military communications people because they thought this was sacrilege.
The story of ARPANET is of human ingenuity.